just a brief introduction about myself. I collect Byzantine coins, in particular late Byzantine. If my co-hosts and co-panelists want to introduce themselves, maybe be good.
Yeah, my name is Sadie. I collect mostly Roman coins. Yeah.
Hey everyone. Thank you guys for inviting me onto the show today. My name's Antoine and I collect primarily Greek coins, but I've got a bit of a taste for everything. And I'm definitely delving into the Roman Republic at the current moment. So that's sort of my interest. And yeah,
Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for
great to
joining
be
us
here.
today. Yeah, we're glad to
Thank
have
you.
you. Yeah. So the New York sale is a sale that happens one time a year. In New York, as the name indicates. But it's a great sale, sort of a feature auction with lots of high end targets. And so I thought that this would be a fun exercise to go through and kind of pick out our favorite coins of the sale and talk about them more in depth. So for our first lot here, I've got lot 174. This is a Sextus Pompey AES. And so for a bit of history behind this coin, you obviously had the civil wars with Caesar and Pompey, and their predecessors came along, and Sextus, or Pompey's son Sextus, came over and kind of took his position and launched a pirate war in Sicily, while Antony and Octavian sort of split the empire between them after a few other wars, civil wars. So this would have been issued about 42 to 38 BC, and it's quite interesting if you look at the obverse here. Normally the depictions of Janus are less stylized, they have less features to them, but if you kind of look here, you can recognize Pompey's face in the obverse, which I thought was quite unusual. A lot of times these coins, even though they try to resemble Pompey's likeness, they don't really hit the dot there, and it's not obvious what they or who they are trying to represent. So to see a coin this crisp, this clear, not evidently Pompey is quite unusual. So I thought for that reason it stood out to me. And then for legends, you've got Magnus for Pompey Magnus on the obverse and Pius Imperator, talking about Sextus there. And so the starting price is $499. The estimate's 1,000. It's at 650. I thought that for such a great strike, great style, that seemed pretty fair to me. I'm no Republican or Imperatorial expert, but I thought that this seemed like a nice coin and a good price. So, Antoine, do you have anything to say about it? Any input on the coin?
Yeah, well, I think you covered most of it. I just wanted to say what stands out for me really, alongside the portraits on the obverse, really is the reverse condition. It's really wonderful, the prow of the galley, and you can even see the forecastle in quite well-preserved detail, which is fairly rare on these. You can see the ram as well, it's nicely there. I think I don't know if there's really any room for cleaning at this point. It's something of a contentious topic, but there may even be room to clean it out a bit further and get some more detail visible. So it's really quite impressive on that front. Um, as far as the legend, it's also an interesting reverse legend, I think. Like Sextus is very much playing on that Roman virtue of pietas, which is something we see a lot in just the Republic as a whole, and especially towards this like late Republican, death of the Republic era. We see a lot of this, especially under Augustus, this revival of old Republican mores, and Pietas is definitely one of those that comes up quite a bit. It's a mainstay of the Aeneid, where Aeneas is constantly referred to as Pius Aeneas, and he has this, it's this combination of filial duty, which is what Sextus is embodying, but also this divine mission that he's been sent on. And I think all of the people, all of the imperators of that era sort of felt that in some sense, that they were the preordained, divinely inspired person to lead Rome. So it definitely, I think to me, it alludes to that. So it's an interesting and quite short title compared to some others from that time period.
Yeah, that's some great insight. Thank you. That's a good point too, with the whole piety and the Aeneid, that whole era. I would say that Sextus definitely embodies that in his actions to try to revenge his father. Zadie, do you have any insight on the coin or any thoughts?
I think we've lost Sadie temporarily.
He mentioned he had some internet issues, so we'll go ahead and move on. Uh, we can see here. Antoine, do you have a lot you want to highlight?
Let's see. Yeah, there's lot 18. If
Lot
we
18.
quickly switch over to the Greeks. Yep. So this is the one. This is a tetradrachm. That's the probably the one of the most common, second most common denomination from the Greek world. And this is made right at that sort of inflection point in global and especially Greek history, where it's immediately post Alexander. All these Hellenistic kingdoms are they're popping up, and they're also at this point they're sort of starting to settle down and become very defined political entities that will last for the next 2 to 300 years. And this is a man who personally did not end up having a very significant stake in that after around the point this coin was made. Yeah, he was on something of a losing streak after this, Demetrius, unfortunately for him. But this coin is a tetradrachm of his made after the successful siege, I believe, of Salamis in Cyprus, I want to say, but don't quote me exactly on that. So that's what the reverse type especially is alluding to, his successful use of ships and siege engines on those ships in conquering the island essentially.
Yeah, I
So
would
he's got
say,
Poseidon there.
like, as a non-Greek collector, that reverse stands out to me. Normally, you might see Zeus seated on a throne, but to see him, or I'm not sure if that is Zeus there standing, holding a trident, but either
Ah,
way,
that's actually that's the interesting part. It's Poseidon instead of Zeus. So Demetrius is definitely showing us that he's because he had the largest fleet in the era.
okay.
So he's definitely showing us that he's being supported by the sea god. He's got that naval prowess behind him.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I wouldn't think you see that often, a different god in the reverse, especially with the like tetradrachms of the Greeks, because normally it is Zeus, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's often Zeus, Athena, and in the Hellenistic you get quite a bit of Apollo or Heracles as well, but Poseidon is quite rare. I think the most common one is by far the Demetrius depiction.
And so, how common are these? With it kind of representing a victory, unusual reverse. Do you see these types come up often?
Um, I think with Greek coinage, it's a bit of a tough question to answer because common for Greek is really more like rare for Roman, and rare for Greek might mean anything from once every week to once a month to once a decade, depending
Okay.
on what you collect and how often it generally comes up, what you're used to. I'd say these are relatively common. They show up in just about every major auction, and the prices have been relatively stable. So it's if you're in the market for one, it's quite an achievable coin if you know your budget and the style you want and are willing to wait a bit, a few months maybe. Yeah.
Do you know if there are certain dyes that are sought after with this type?
Well, I think that's another aspect of Greek coinage where there's so much variation between the dies in the same type of coin in the same issue. I would say from what I've personally seen, there are at least two dies that I would personally consider to be not so great stylistically.
Okay.
Demetrius is kind of fat, kind of ugly, and this and one of the other dies that I've seen definitely stand out from the mix as being stylistically superior, in my opinion. But that varies, of course, person to person.
Yeah, I would say from the photos too, it looks like it has a great relief.
Yep, another feature of Greek coinage, again, really strong relief. They're very deeply carved dies, and especially Hellenistic portraiture, that late classical and early Hellenistic portraiture is just very lifelike and it's very sculptural in the aesthetic. So it really pops out of the flan.
Yeah, they're great coins. Yeah, thanks for sharing this one.
Yep, there's one quick point about this one that I think is important to us collectors, although it might not be, it doesn't really change how the coin looks or how it might speak to you or not. But if we go down to the description,
Sure.
yeah. So just at the bottom there, we can see the provenance.
The
So this one has,
provenance.
yeah, it has a photo provenance, like photo proof in the catalog from 1988, but then it also has a listing going back all the way to 1873. And I looked into Roland and Fouerdon, however you pronounce that, and they are no longer in business. So they were an old, I believe, English auction house, and yeah, they haven't been in business for a while now.
Oh, that's great. You often don't see that before the 1900s, the provenance.
No, yeah, it's quite incredible. This coin was made probably before most of the US coins that are on the market and collected today. It was already being sold as an antique.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just shows why ancient coins are that much better. But yeah, it's a great coin, great style, great relief, and I'd say the price seems pretty reasonable, at least right now at 700. I'm not a Greek expert, but for a nice tetradrachm of nice style, great relief, unusual reverse too, Seems like a fair price.
Oh, very much. I'd say if it didn't have the provenance, you could probably see it go anywhere from 1,000 to 1,400. And with the provenance, really, if somebody picks up on that and finds a way to verify it as well, it could hit triple or quadruple what the current bid is. Yeah, no
Cool.
problem.
Well, yeah, we'll go ahead and take a look at our third lot. So this is one I pulled up kind of in line with the Pompey AE Ass. It is a AE Duponteus of Octavian with Julius Caesar. So this is minted in Gaul. I thought the type was interesting due to number one, an unusual obverse, and number two, unusual reverse. So it's got on the obverse great style. You can immediately tell with this portrait that that is Julius Caesar, and same with Octavian next to him. So I thought that that was great. Oftentimes I feel like on these bronzes the style isn't the best. Sometimes it's crudely done, but to see an example with such a great portrait, such a great style, even strike, I'd say that that's pretty remarkable and stood out to me for that reason. And the reverse here has got an unusual, what the description calls a superstructure on this boat. I just thought that was unusual issue. No great provenance here, but either way, great style, great portraits, and yeah, a bit unusual overall the type. And with no bid yet, which is kind of surprising, I would tend to think in this market, if you have a Julius Caesar Octavian coin with this great style, I would expect to see a bid at least now. With the 325 opening, that seems pretty good.
Yeah, it seems very good actually. You're tempting me almost at this point.
I'll say I'm
Yeah,
tempted
it's a very
myself.
nice. Yeah, I can see why. It's a very nice set of portraits. They're very distinct too. You can definitely see a resemblance, but there's a clear distinction between and Octavian and Julius Caesar there.
Yeah,
Just Julius Caesar presumably is on the left, and he looks noticeably older. The hairline is receding a bit. His cheeks are a little saggier. Yeah, it's very nicely executed,
I wonder too
especially for a bronze.
if perhaps condition is what's scaring bidders away. I mean, you can kind of see here in the reverse, there's some sort of, I don't know if it's a flan error or possible corrosion at some points, but some sort of large gash, a missing chunk of the coin, and then kind of just little corrosion dots in the obverse here, maybe around like 2 to 6 o'clock. But even
Yeah,
so,
that's
yeah,
definitely a possibility. I guess you have to worry about that with bronze, but at this point it looks quite stable
yeah,
just looking at it.
yeah, and I would say at $325, that seems quite fair. So we'll see. I'd be very surprised if that doesn't go for above estimate at 700. But yeah, overall, a nice coin, I thought. Great style, great busts. Is there another lot you want to share from the Greeks?
Oh boy, are there.
Hmm,
I think if we pop over to lot 24, this I
24.
think deviates a bit from our everyman collectors coins,
Okay,
but I think it's just interesting to share
definitely.
nonetheless. So with this one, we've got the classic gold stater, a relatively common denomination, especially from this early Hellenistic era. There's quite a bit of new wealth that fluxed into the Greek states from the Persian treasury following the conquest of Alexander. The Persians, of course, were not known necessarily for using coinage. They only really minted coins for circulation with traders in the Greek world and across the coast of Asia Minor and the Phoenician coastline to an extent. So just a small, maybe one third or one quarter of their world had to do with coinage. So when Alexander went east, there was a absolute vast sum of wealth that he extracted from the Persian treasuries at Persepolis and Babylon and just all the way across to India. And yeah, they were many of them, much of the money was used to make coins just like this. And of course, the Alexander staters and the later Philip staters that you see. What's interesting about this, though, is that it's a generally quite rare type because it is Alexander deified on the obverse
Mm-hmm.
and then Athena seated on the reverse. Now, this motif is common 2 centuries later under Mithridates the Sixth, the Poison King, I believe he's referred to commonly. Um,
The
so he
foe
was
of the
one of the
Republic.
final. Yeah, yes. Fought against Pompey and Sulla before him, and he was really the final Greek thorn in the side for Rome. But this is the original design made under Lysimachus immediately following Alexander's death. And so the obverse portrait is a deified Alexander wearing the horn of Zeus Ammon in his hair, as well as a diadem. And then on the reverse, we have Athena and obviously the legend of King Lysimachus. But it's just a very fine style. Like the later ones are very crude, relatively low relief design, whereas this is just absolutely stunning. It's easily on par with any of the silver coinage of Lysimachus, which is quite prized by, I think, everyone, and especially collectors of Greek coins. So yeah,
Yeah,
just a fantastic piece.
this style seems great, especially the hair is just so free flowing that I would. It seems like a lot of time was spent on that in particular, just to get that right and get that kind of natural look. Yeah, overall, I mean, even though it's not perfect centering in the obverse, it's not cutting any details off. You still got the full chin, full nose. I mean, pretty much as close as you can get to a perfect coin.
Yeah, it really is. And then you add in that rarity factor, that sort of not sort of the thing that you see every day, and it really I'm actually surprised the price is only at 3,200 today, 5 days away, because a silver tetradrachm in this condition with that style would easily clear
Hmm.
that sort of price in this market. So gold stater, with a bit of provenance, decently good provenance too. Lance from the
Yeah.
1990s is fairly solid. So yeah, it's a just a wonderful coin.
Well, it makes you wonder too, especially with a feature auction like this that's going to be having live bidding in New York. Do you think those kind of big shark bidders, those millionaires who might come in and try to win a coin like this, are going to wait and try to go in person or send a representative down to the auction? Maybe hold off on this online bidding?
Um, yeah, look, if it was me bidding, even when I do bid, actually, in all honesty, I usually try to wait towards the end, either the day of, the night before, or the live session itself, because it really just it cuts down on the time that other people have to either raise the maximum bid or just outbid you outright. So yeah, I think whoever wins this coin, unless there's been a significant substantial pre-bid already placed, they are likely going to do so during the live session, and we'll probably see that 3,200 figure double or triple easily.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to come back in a few days and see what this hammer's for. Yeah, and thank you for sharing. It is a great coin, great style, and in gold too. It's just lovely.
Yep. Oh, actually, as a quick side note, you don't need to despair if you want one of these. They are quite common in silver, so for anyone seeing this and thinking they want one but being scared off by the high price tag in the gold, they have risen in price recently with COVID and with the hot market, but they're common and they're really quite lovely, quite accessible coins considering what they are.
It's good news for us. Well, cool. We'll go and take a look at the next lot here. So I pulled this up. I think the type isn't too interesting in and of itself, but it's almost a perfect coin. If you look here at the detail, there's little to no wear, almost perfect strike, just immaculate surfaces, almost no issues. It looks like the reverse die might have been clogged somewhat. Just gotten a flat strike, but overall, besides a small nick on his forehead, if I zoom back in here, you can kind of see that there's practically no wear, no issue on this coin. It seemed to me that if you wanted to actually own as close to a Florida coin as you can get, this might be your option here at the New York sale. Any
Yeah,
thoughts on
this
this one?
is it's a very beautiful portrait. That's one of those things that actually really stands out to me in these third century sestertii is just how well executed and well preserved the portraiture usually is. Whether it's Gordian or Volusian, both of the Philips, even Galenus at times, there is just some very high quality portraiture on par, I'd say, with the sort of stuff that came out of the first and second centuries.
Yeah, which is
And
quite
it's usually
surprising.
yeah, yeah, and the coins are very similar in size and weight, perhaps a bit smaller, but similarly impressive, and the price tag is usually quite affordable in comparison, which is quite good for us.
Yeah, I'll be going through, like you mentioned, a few more of these Sestertii from the third century, fourth century, and this is the most expensive one I'm sharing, and it's, in my opinion, not even the best at $400. I mean, I think that's a great deal for like pretty much a perfect coin, as close as you'll get. You can't really beat that price. But it just goes to show that if you want to get some cheap coins and some great coins with great style at that, this is pretty much where you might want to go. The third century of Rome, the crisis here, you can get a lot of great coins for little to no money. I mean, obviously, it's a lot of money, but in comparison to what we just looked at, it's some cheap coins. So we can go ahead and move on
Yeah,
to the next. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say you're paying a lot less than you would for a Greek silver, and even significantly less than you would for a Hadrian or an Antoninus Pius, and
Yeah.
it's very much on par. I love the beard details on this especially.
Yeah,
You
with no
don't see
wear.
Gordian
Yeah.
with facial hair very often.
Stands out too. Yeah. Just a great coin. And the surfaces, I just feel like it kind of points you directly to the portrait with no issues. Looks almost mirror-like. Just, yeah, awesome to see. But yeah, we can go and head on to the next lot. Do you have another Greek you want to share?
Oh, let's see. I think let's go to lot 54.
54. All right.
Yes.
Oh, great. Antiochus.
Yep. So these are just great coins. Seleucid coinage is I should collect more of it. I think everyone should collect more of it, although in that case it would probably end up being less affordable than it is right now, but there's just so much of it out there. They were quite a powerful, sprawling empire for the better part of 3 centuries. And so there's a lot of really nice coinage that came out of that. Especially the early first half, the fourth and the third century stuff is just absolutely amazing, and this is a perfect example of that. Really, I think the portraits that you get on these are just about the pinnacle of Hellenistic style and engraving. The Apollo on the reverse is as good as just about anything you'll get out of the classical era. They're even better than this sometimes. And yeah, I think we saw the price tag there. It was a minimum bid of 350 and no bidders yet. So it's an order of magnitude cheaper than what you'd be paying for a similar coin from the classical era in similar condition. These are just really wonderful, historically significant because this is the first generation of post-Alexandrian rulers. This is after the Diadochi, so this was Antiochus the First, the son of Seleucus. And so he's an especially interesting character because he is unlike the Ptolemies, and to an extent, I guess the Antigonids are a local dynasty because they're in Macedon, but the Ptolemies are these foreign invaders that sort of come in and set up shop and they start exploiting the country. But Seleucus was one of the very few people that stayed married to his Susa wife following the death of Alexander. So his son, Antiochus, from that marriage, was local as well as Macedonian. So he had both sets of ancestry to sort of pull on. And yeah, it made him a very popular ruler in his time, and he spent quite a lot of time in the east, especially during the later years of his father's reign. He went out to the eastern satrapies, Bactria and Sogdiana, Durangiana, and he even has some coinage from there. So he was I'd say he was probably one of the better attuned leaders of that era, especially in that first century, towards what his people needed, towards actually being a local ruler as opposed to being seen as this foreigner. So he has a fairly stable rule, and yet just historically interesting, artistically beautiful, and as you can see, quite affordable compared to a lot of the other stuff out there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You mentioned his mixed background of being sort of Hellenistic and Persian with his father and mother. I wonder, the Persians tended to depict their leaders as semi divine. In this case, I can't help but notice his portrait almost has that eyes to God look you see on the coins of Constantine. Is that intentional to sort of have an almost divine look to Antiochus here with the portrait, or is that just a side effect of the style?
You know what? I'd say that is intentional, and I'd say it's something that not just Antiochus, but I think all of the Eastern kings, Hellenistic kings, definitely adopted this, even the ones in Macedon, even the Antigonids to an extent, but especially with the Ptolemies and with the Seleucids, you see this adoption of the Eastern notion of a divine ruler, a god king, as opposed to simply an acclaimed, first among equals kind of ruler that you'd have in Macedon. And so, yeah, even with Ptolemy, he declares himself pharaoh and he has this ruler cult set up. Seleucus has a ruler cult set up for himself and he names cities after himself and all of this. And yeah, Antiochus was, um, yeah, he followed in that tradition. He was also the last king in history to take on the title, um, King of the Universe, which was a
Hmm.
very old Sumerian title. So he definitely bought into that tradition of the Eastern divine monarch. Yes.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a great coin, and hopefully it gets a bid. I mean, even an estimate, I think that's a pretty good deal. But yeah, we can go ahead and move on to the next slot here. So we just took a look at an great Greek coin, kind of bouncing on lot 381 in the affordable third century coins. Well, we can look at this one first. So this is a bit more expensive, but I thought it was interesting. It's a medallion-like coin from Trajan Decius. So it's an AE double sestertius at 44 grams. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You don't see large bronzes like that very often. It doesn't have much of a pedigree, but it's an interesting type, I think. And you don't see often these large bronze medallions, especially for this century. It's a time where they kind of decreased due to inflation in many cases the amount of bronze in the coins and kept making these smaller and lighter. So to see a huge coin like this actually preserved from antiquity and struck, I think it's pretty interesting. It's got decent style. Surfaces aren't great. There's some wear, some issues, but I think for the kind of medallion-like aspect of the coin, you can overlook all that. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think you've covered a lot of it. Just like the Gordian, it has a very nice portrait. It's frankly quite huge. It's larger than a decadramme. It's nearing the Pentachai dodecadramme, some of the largest ancient coins out there that can be privately bought and sold. So yeah, very impressive. And for 1200, that's really it's a lot of money, but it's
For what it is,
quality.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very quality for what you're spending. It's very high quality.
Yeah, I wonder if the smoothing will scare away bidders. I normally wouldn't really feature a coin with some smoothing, but I thought that, at least in this case, such a cool coin, might as well show it. But yeah, overall nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd say that's smoothing is definitely an issue, but I think when you're dealing with these nice bronzes, Roman bronzes, it's something that you sometimes you have to just accept and move forward with it, especially depending on the pedigree, depending on when it was discovered. If it does have an older hidden provenance that dates back to the 1800s, for example, it was quite commonplace at the time. It was considered good practice even to smooth them, maybe even enhance the details somewhat. So yeah, archaeology and just collecting opinions, people's opinions on all of this changed significantly over time.
yeah.
So it's possible it was altered in a different era where the standards were different, but as it is right now, I think it's quite beautiful. Yeah.
Look at
And it's definitely worth opening.
his lower clothing here too. The detail. I don't know if you can make that out, but it's actually got some pattern left on his shoulder here. That's great to see. That even though it's kind of worn by his hair, his lower like, kind of cuirass still has detail.
Yeah, it's almost, I'd say, maybe a menander pattern.
Yeah.
A meander, sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, overall a cool coin. Another one we can look at, just kind of bouncing on the more affordable coins. I thought this one was next, so that's why I kind of led with the intro there. But this is a great coin, I thought, that kind of shows the third century bronzes and that they can be very cheap and affordable. So this is at $140 an opening with not a single bid. And although the reverse is sort of messed up, I just think the obverse is great. You look at the style, the strike, the surfaces, the patina. I just feel like it all comes together to lead to a great bronze. And although Trajan Decius may not be the greatest ruler, this may not be the rarest type, you can still get a pretty great example with great details, great surfaces, great patina for, I mean, right now, not, I mean, $140 opening, no bids. Just seems like a great deal and an affordable coin that's just a great specimen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna save this one for later, I think.
Yeah, it's one that
Yeah, I
I'm
think
kind
you've
of
covered
watching just to
everything.
see what prices will be. I think like even the reverse, it's not great. You can kind of see there's a lot of surface issues. It looks rough, maybe double struck. I couldn't list all the errors there, but something's going on. You know, it's not great. But when you kind of just compare the obverse to the reverse, it's such a big difference that just for that bust alone, you can kind of see like the wonderful rainbow patina, changing colors. It's just a magnificent coin that I really like, and it's one I'm definitely watching, and we'll see what it goes for. But yeah, hopefully mine. But yeah, it's a great
Yeah,
coin. You can kind of see
hopefully.
too, yeah, on his cuirass, a little bit of pattern left. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, no, no. Yeah, you're fine. I was just going to say, I think it's a common theme with these that these late sestertii that the reverse is usually a bit more worn or a bit worse shape overall. than the obverse. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe the reverse dyes were used for longer, or they just didn't care about switching them out as often, but I think you see it quite a lot whether it's parts of the die that have been filled, the die is broken, it's just really worn down. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. At least anecdotally, I think I've
Yeah,
noticed that.
I agree. Maybe it gives insight into the mint, their practices, that the reverse wasn't that important. Kind of the whole focus and attention of their efforts was on the emperor. It was their prerogative to make him the best they could and try to put all their effort. The best engravers in the obverse, and maybe the reverse was kind of left behind, a second thought. Maybe just kind of shows ideas or practices at the mint at that time.
Yeah, I think it's good political insight too into the era. A new emperor every couple of years. In this case, Trajan Decius only rules for a little over 2 years.
Yeah,
The guy before him, Philip, is barely there for 6. The guy after him is barely there for 2. So it's a very volatile era, and you really want to get your face out there and tell the people, I'm in charge,
yeah,
I
which is
guess.
also like wonderfully ironic. I think for all these short-ruled emperors have such a dignified bust, dignified pose. I mean, you look at this coin, you would think he's a wonderful statesman, that he might have ruled for a long time on par with Augustus, a gentle reign. But yeah, obviously the history does not reflect the coins. But once again, it kind of just goes to show the propaganda these coins might have had. Like getting this coin out there could have lended him credibility for the people, to the people, I mean.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and take a look at a Greek coin next? Is there a next slot you want to pull up?
I suppose we could continue our short traipse through the Hellenistic. So let's go to lot 153.
Oh, cool. Yeah, this is a great type.
Yep, this is fairly rare. This is the type itself is relatively common. Alexander deified wearing an elephant scalp on his in place of the Heracles wearing the Nemean lion. So it's a spoof of that, if you will, or just changed up. So it's Alexander wearing an elephant scalp, and the reverse is the seated Zeus. But yeah, these are actually one of the earliest Hellenistic issues where they deviate from that standard Heracles and Zeus design that Alexander sort of standardized across the Mediterranean world. It's issued by Ptolemy in the immediate aftermath of Alexander's death. I believe this would have been a short while after the Treaty of Triparadisos. So that's sort of where everybody decided this is how we're going to divvy up the kingdoms. So Antigonus gets Asia Minor and Macedon. Me Ptolemy, I'll take Egypt and Palestine, and then Seleucus, you get this little stretch of land around Babylon, and you'd sort of figure your deal out with the East. And yeah, everybody sort of divvied up what they wanted, what they could get their hands on. Um, I believe this is a short while after that. And yeah, it's stylistically quite nice. It's a very local, I'd say, to Africa. There were elephants employed by the Persians, and then, of course, further east, but war elephants in Africa, definitely something that we see later on, of course, further west with Hannibal and the Carthaginians in general. But yeah, beautiful imagery, the notion of Alexander on the coinage. And if you just look real closely underneath the elephant tusks, you can see the diadem just poking out
Oh, wow,
between
yeah.
his hair. Yep. So it's, Alexander the king of the world, basically. Here he is wearing the scalp of basically the most majestic, largest animal on Earth. And here I am, Ptolemy, reminding you that he allowed me to rule over you guys here in Egypt,
Hmm.
basically, because I'm the next pharaoh after him. So, political message, artistically interesting. And yeah, this earlier style is a bit more sculptural and it has a slightly more natural look to it. So these are a bit rare. The issue itself, the larger one, the later issue, is sort of flatter. It loses that artistic je ne sais quoi, and yeah, it these are sought after, but it's a very nice coin. It's not in the best condition, but I'd say value-wise, this could be a very good addition to someone's collection. Yeah.
Already at 1,100, so I guess it's kind of picking up steam. What would you say it's worth in this condition?
It's a tough one because I've seen slightly better ones go for 5,000 and I've seen slightly better ones go for 15,000 and slightly worse ones go for 1,500. So I'd say right now it's par for the course. I probably would say it shouldn't go more than double the current bid.
Okay.
Reasonably close to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great type. A bit off topic, but I wonder, is that possible for a person to wear an elephant scalp? Seems like it would be a bit
It's a
large,
good
but
question.
yeah,
He
obviously for
has
a
the
power
tusks
statement.
included,
Yeah,
so probably not.
maybe a baby elephant,
Uh,
but yeah, I love that power statement. And I think you're kind of right in that it sort of brings that African element to this coin, the like Alexander portrait, and just brings sort of that interesting cultural blend that just shows or goes to show how far like the empire that Alexander ruled combined different peoples, different ethnicities, different cultures under one reign, one rule. Even though this is just the Egyptian part, I just think it's cool to kind of see like how far from home the Macedonians really went.
Absolutely, yeah. You see Alexander's portrait crop up as far east as Afghanistan, and you see it obviously in Macedon, across Asia Minor, all the way through and down to Egypt and North Africa. So it's really incredible.
Yeah, so I think that we're about running up on 35 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and end part one here, but we're going to come back soon with part two of the New York sale. But I hope you all enjoyed this part one so far, kind of delving into the Hellenistic style, classical style, and then later on into Roman, early Republican, imperatorial, and then 3rd century crisis coins. Thank you, Antoine, for being a panel member here. We greatly appreciate you coming on, sharing your expertise, and showing us some great targets here and helping us learn some new stuff about Greek coins.